The sun had barely risen over the jagged skyline of Washington, D.C. on April 8, 2025, when the first shouts pierced the air. They came from the National Mall, where a sea of bodies swelled like a living tide, their voices rising in unison against the man who had once again seized the reins of power, Donald J. Trump. His second term had begun with a thunderclap of controversy, a whirlwind of executive orders that slammed shut borders, slashed federal programs, and ignited a firestorm of outrage across the globe. "Trump closes," screamed the headlines, a phrase that had become a rallying cry for millions. He had promised to make America great again once more, but to his detractors, this was a closing, not just of policies or borders, but of hope, of progress, of the very soul of a nation. Now, as the world unleashed its fury, massive protests erupted, not just in the United States, but in cities from London to Manila, from Paris to Panama City, a global chorus of defiance against a man who seemed to revel in the chaos he sowed. If you love our protagonist, Elena, the fierce voice at the heart of this uprising, subscribe to the channel now. Her story is one of courage, and she needs your support. Elena Martinez stood at the forefront of the D.C. protest, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her megaphone trembling slightly in her grip, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. She was a 32-year-old community organizer from Chicago, a daughter of immigrants who had watched Trump's first term tear apart families like hers. Now, with his re-election in 2024 and a second term unfolding in a blaze of authoritarian moves, she had had enough. "He thinks he can close us out, close our borders, close our rights, close our future," she shouted to the crowd, her voice cutting through the frigid April morning. "But we are here to say no. We are here to take back what's ours." The crowd roared back, a cacophony of cheers and chants, their signs bobbing like buoys in a stormy sea. "Hands off! No billionaire takeover! Trump closes, we rise!" Elena's eyes scanned the faces, students, workers, parents, veterans, all united in their fury. This wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about what he represented, a closing of the world they'd fought to build. Across the Atlantic, London's Trafalgar Square was a mirror of DC's unrest. Protesters clad in raincoats braved a relentless drizzle, their banners sagging but their spirits unbowed. "Trump's tariffs are strangling us," yelled a young man named Liam, his voice hoarse from hours of chanting. The UK had been caught in the crossfire of Trump's trade wars, his threats to annex Canada and seize the Panama Canal sending shockwaves through an already fragile global economy. The BBC reported that over 100,000 had gathered in London alone, with similar scenes in Paris, where the Eiffel Tower loomed over a throng of demonstrators waving tricolors and rainbow flags. In Manila, the protests took on a sharper edge. Trump's rhetoric about taking back territories had stirred old colonial wounds, and the streets burned with effigies of the American president, his golden hair a mocking flame against the night sky. The world was not just angry, it was wounded, and the wounds bled into the streets. Back in the U.S., the protests were metastasizing. In Chicago, Elena's hometown, the Loop was gridlocked as thousands marched, shutting down bridges and highways. In Los Angeles, they spilled onto the 101 freeway, their banners fluttering in the exhaust-laden breeze. "Nobody is illegal. Stop the deportations." Trump's administration had doubled down on its immigration crackdown, with ICE agents rounding up migrants at a pace that outstripped even his first term. A Salvadoran man had been mistakenly deported just days ago, a blunder the White House shrugged off as collateral damage. Elena had seen the footage, families torn apart, children screaming, and it fueled her resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for them, for the millions who couldn't raise their voices without risking everything. "This isn't America," she bellowed into the megaphone. "This is a cage, and we're breaking it open." The White House, meanwhile, was a fortress under siege. Trump golfed in Florida that weekend, but his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, faced the cameras with a steely glare. "President Trump will not be deterred," she declared, dismissing the protests as noise from a minority. But the numbers told a different story. Over 1,400 demonstrations across all 50 states, with nearly 600,000 signed up through grassroots networks like Indivisible. Organizers claimed millions had turned out, a figure impossible to verify but plausible given the scale. In New York, Times Square pulsed with bodies, the neon lights reflecting off signs demanding an end to the billionaire takeover led by Trump and his ally, Elon Musk. Musk, now a fixture in Trump's cabinet, had pushed for cuts to Social Security and Medicaid, arguing they were inefficient. The backlash was immediate. Veterans, seniors, and workers who relied on those programs joined the fray, their anger a palpable force. In Panama City, the protests took a darker turn. Trump's offhand remark about reclaiming the Panama Canal had ignited a firestorm of nationalism. "Public enemy!" the crowds chanted, waving Panamanian flags as they stormed toward the U.S. Embassy. A line of riot police held them back, but the tension crackled like static. In Mexico City, the response was equally fierce. Trump's trade war with Canada and Mexico had tanked the peso, and sports fans had taken to booing the Star-Spangled Banner at every game. The world was closing ranks against Trump, but he seemed unfazed, posting cryptic messages on social media. "FAFO," he wrote, alongside a photo of himself in a fedora, a taunt to his enemies. "Mess around and find out." Elena felt the weight of it all as night fell over D.C. The mall was a sea of flickering lights, candles, phones, flares, each a testament to the defiance that refused to fade. She thought of her parents, who had fled violence only to find a different kind of war here. She thought of the children in detention centers, the workers losing jobs to Musk's outsourcing schemes, the planet choking under policies that denied the climate crisis. "We're not just protesting," she told the crowd, her voice softer now, resolute. "We're building something. A world that doesn't close us out." The cheers rose again, a wave that crashed against the White House gates, and Elena knew this was only the beginning. Elena's words hung in the air as the crowd's lights flickered like stars against the encroaching darkness. The cold bit into her fingers, but her heart burned with a fire that refused to dim. She stepped down from the makeshift stage, a overturned crate draped with a banner, and was immediately swarmed by supporters, their faces a mix of exhaustion and resolve. A young woman pressed a thermos of coffee into her hands, whispering, "You're our voice, Elena. Don't stop." She nodded, the weight of their trust settling on her shoulders like armor. Beyond the mall, sirens wailed as police reinforcements arrived, their flashing lights casting an ominous red glow. The night was far from over, and Elena knew the real battle was just beginning. A clash not just of bodies, but of wills, against a man who thrived on division. The next morning, the news exploded with images of the D.C. protests splashed across every screen, from CNN to Al Jazeera. Pundits debated whether this was a revolution or a tantrum, but Elena didn't care for their labels. She was already on a bus to Baltimore, where dock workers had walked off the job in solidarity, crippling ports along the eastern seaboard. Trump's trade wars had slashed their livelihoods, and his promise of American jobs rang hollow as Musk's automation schemes loomed. Elena met them at a foggy pier, their breath visible in the dawn chill, and listened as a grizzled foreman named Jamal told her, "We're not just striking for us. It's for everyone he's shutting out." She clasped his calloused hand, vowing to amplify their fight, her voice a thread stitching together a fraying nation. Half a world away, Paris was a cauldron of defiance. The Champs-Élysées shimmered with tear gas as protesters clashed with gendarmes, their chants echoing off Haussmann's grand facades. Trump firm, new souverains. Trump closes, we open. The spark had been Trump's threat to slap tariffs on French wine, a move that enraged vintners and rallied a nation proud of its heritage. A student named Claire, her face streaked with soot, live-streamed the chaos to millions, her voice trembling but fierce. He thinks he can choke us? We'll choke him back. The video went viral, crossing oceans to inspire Elena's comrades in D.C., a reminder that this was a global war against a singular force, a man whose shadow stretched far beyond America's shores. Back in Washington, Trump emerged from his Mar-a-Lago cocoon, his motorcade slicing through Florida's palm-lined streets to a waiting press corps. Flanked by Secret Service, he grinned that familiar brash grin, his tie flapping like a battle flag. These protesters? Losers. Sad, he barked, dismissing the millions as paid agitators, while touting his latest executive order, a ban on foreign tech imports that sent Silicon Valley into a tailspin. We're closing the leaks, folks. America first. The crowd of red-hatted supporters cheered, but beyond the rally's bubble, the world seethed. Tech stocks plummeted, and in San Francisco, coders joined baristas in the streets, their signs reading, "No wall, no ban, no Musk plan." Trump's defiance only poured fuel on the fire, and Elena watched the speech on her phone, her jaw tight with resolve. In Chicago, the protests took a personal turn for Elena. Her younger brother, Miguel, a DACA recipient working as a mechanic, had been detained during a routine traffic stop, caught in the ICE dragnet Trump had unleashed. She raced home, her heart pounding as she navigated the city's clogged streets, the skyline a blur through her tears. At the detention center, she found a crowd of families clutching photos and pleas, their voices drowned by the hum of bureaucracy. Miguel's call came late that night, his voice crackling through a payphone. "They're moving me tomorrow, Lena. Don't let them win." She promised him she wouldn't, but as she hung up, the weight of her words crushed her. This wasn't just a movement anymore. It was a rescue mission, and she'd tear down every wall to save him. The White House doubled down, announcing a curfew in D.C. and deploying National Guard units to restore order. Helicopters buzzed overhead as Elena returned to the mall, now a militarized zone ringed with barbed wire. She stood with a smaller but fiercer crowd, their numbers thinned by arrests but their spirit unbroken. A guardsman, barely older than Miguel, met her gaze through his visor, his expression unreadable. "We don't have to be enemies," she called to him, her voice steady despite the chaos. He didn't respond, but the flicker in his eyes told her he was listening. Across the city, reports trickled in, arrests in the hundreds, clashes in Foggy Bottom, a Molotov cocktail shattering a precinct window. The closure Trump craved was tightening, but so was the resistance. In Panama, the protests turned deadly. A skirmish near the U.S. Embassy left 2 demonstrators shot, their blood staining the pavement as a nation mourned. Trump's canal comments had lit a fuse, and now it burned toward an explosion. The Panamanian president, a wiry man named Torres, addressed the world from a balcony, his voice trembling with rage, "We will not be your colony again." Satellite images showed crowds swelling along the canal's locks, threatening to halt global trade, a move that could cripple Trump's economic boasts. Elena saw the footage on a grainy live stream, her chest tightening. The world was bleeding, and she felt every wound as if it were her own, a shared pain that bound them all. Musk, ever the provocateur, stoked the flames from his perch in the administration. At a Texas factory opening, he unveiled a fleet of autonomous drones, the future of security, he called them, designed to patrol borders and quell unrest. "Efficiency," he crowed, his voice dripping with disdain for the whiners in the streets. But the drone's first flight over El Paso sparked outrage. Activists hacked their feeds, projecting images of detained children onto city walls. Elena's network spread the hack nationwide, a digital middle finger to Musk's vision of a closed, controlled world. "They can't silence us," she told her team, her eyes blazing as they plotted their next move in a cramped D.C. basement. By week's end, the protests had evolved into something more, a tapestry of strikes, sit-ins, and sabotage weaving across continents. In Seattle, Baristas dumped coffee into the sound rather than serve it under Trump's tariffs. In Tokyo, students boycotted American brands, their hashtags trending worldwide. Elena coordinated with allies via encrypted chats, her voice a beacon in the storm. "They want us tired," she said during a late-night call with organizers from London to Lagos. "But we're not closing, we're opening doors they can't shut." Her words spread like wildfire, igniting new rallies, new hope. The world was fracturing, but in its cracks, something fierce was growing. As dawn broke over D.C. again, Elena stood on the mall's edge, the Capitol dome a silhouette against a bruised sky. Miguel's fate hung over her, a personal wound in a global war. She clutched a photo of him, grinning at a Cubs game, free and fearless, and whispered, "I'm coming for you." The crowd behind her swelled once more, their chants a heartbeat in the morning mist. "Trump closes, we rise." She turned to face them, her megaphone raised, and spoke with a clarity that cut through the chaos. "This isn't their America. It's ours. And we're taking it back, together." The roar that followed shook the earth, a promise that the fight was far from over. The echo of the crowd's roar lingered in Elena's ears as she lowered the megaphone, her breath visible in the crisp dawn air. The Capitol loomed ahead, its white stone a mocking symbol of power that felt further from the people than ever. She tucked Miguel's photo into her jacket, her resolve hardening like steel. Word had spread overnight. Trump was set to address Congress that evening, a rare move to push a national security package that would expand surveillance and fast-track deportations. Elena's phone buzzed with alerts from her network. "He's closing the noose," one read. She rallied her team, a scrappy crew of organizers, hackers, and medics, in a nearby tent, their faces lit by the glow of laptops. "We hit them where it hurts," she said, her voice low but fierce. "Tonight, we shut it down." Across the country, the resistance pulsed with new energy. In Atlanta, civil rights veterans linked arms with Gen Z activists, blocking highways with a silent sit-in that stretched for miles. In Denver, ski instructors and ranchers, unlikely allies, marched together, their signs decrying the environmental rollbacks Trump had revived. The White House claimed only radicals opposed him, but the diversity of the crowds told a different story. A viral video from Houston showed a cowboy in a Stetson tossing a Molotov cocktail at a billboard of Trump's grinning face, captioned, "Even Texas says no." Elena watched it loop on her screen, a grim smile tugging at her lips. The fury wasn't just urban or coastal, it was everywhere, a wildfire Trump couldn't extinguish. In London, the protests morphed into a cultural rebellion. Musicians staged an impromptu concert in Hyde Park, their lyrics a blistering takedown of Trump's trade threats, broadcast live to millions. "He closes borders, we open minds," sang a punk vocalist named Ruby, her voice raw over thrashing guitars. The crowd surged, tearing down a mock wall of cardboard emblazoned with MAGA slogans. Scotland Yard scrambled to contain it, but the spirit was uncontainable, spilling into Edinburgh and Cardiff. Elena's allies sent her the footage, a reminder that this fight transcended nations. It was a battle for the soul of a shrinking world, one Trump seemed hell-bent on locking shut. Back in D.C., the day ticked toward Trump's address. Elena's team unfurled their plan, a march on Capitol Hill, time to disrupt his motorcade and flood the airwaves with their message. They'd hacked into local radio frequencies, thanks to a wiry coder named Tarek, and prepped a broadcast of their own, a manifesto voiced by Elena. "He wants to close our voices," she recorded, her tone steady despite the stakes. "But we're louder than his walls." As dusk fell, thousands converged on the hill, their footsteps a drumbeat against the pavement. Police lines thickened, batons gleaming under floodlights, but Elena led the charge, her megaphone a beacon in the twilight. "We are the people. You don't own us." Trump's motorcade rolled into view just as the crowd reached its peak, a black serpent of SUVs snaking through the chaos. Protesters surged, banging on hoods and chanting, No more cages! Secret Service agents barked orders, but the sheer mass overwhelmed them. Elena climbed atop a parked car, her silhouette framed against the Capitol's glow, and roared, "This is our house!" The radio hack kicked in, her voice booming over stolen airwaves, reaching homes and cars across the city. For a moment, it felt like victory, a crack in Trump's fortress. But then came the tear gas, a choking fog that turned triumph into pandemonium, and Elena's world blurred as she stumbled, coughing, into the fray. In Panama City, the canal standoff escalated. Protesters had seized a lock, halting a freighter bound for the U.S., their flags waving defiantly against a backdrop of rusting steel. Trump tweeted from the White House, "Panama's a mess, should have taken it back." The words lit a match, riots erupted, and Torres, the Panamanian president, declared a state of emergency, vowing to defend every inch of sovereignty. The UN scrambled to mediate, but the damage was done. Global trade faltered, and markets tanked. Elena, still wiping tears from her gas-stung eyes, saw the news on a volunteer's phone. "He's breaking everything," she muttered, her voice hoarse but resolute. "And we're the ones who'll fix it." Musk, meanwhile, reveled in the chaos. From a SpaceX launch pad in Florida, he live-streamed a rant, his drones buzzing overhead like mechanical wasps. "Protesters are dinosaurs. Progress marches on," he sneered, unveiling a deal to sell his tech to allied nations, a move that would tighten Trump's grip abroad. But the backlash was swift. Hackers, inspired by Elena's crew, crashed his feed with looped footage of detained migrants, their cries drowning his bravado. In Silicon Valley, tech workers walked out, joining the protests with banners reading, "No drones, no deals." Elena's network cheered the sabotage, a small win in a war that felt endless. As night deepened, Trump took the Capitol podium, his orange hair aglow under the lights. "We're closing the gaps, folks, winning bigly," he boasted, unfazed by the chaos outside. He unveiled his security package: drones, deportations, and a Patriot filter for internet access, framing it as a gift to a grateful nation. But the chamber was half empty, boycotting lawmakers a silent rebuke. Outside, Elena regrouped her scattered forces, her throat raw from gas and shouting. "He thinks this is checkmate," she told the crowd, their faces smudged but fierce. "But we're still playing." They cheered, a ragged but unbroken sound, and she knew the night wasn't over. Not for them, not for her. In Chicago, Miguel's fate loomed closer. A lawyer friend texted Elena, "He's on a bus to the border, 48 hours max." Her stomach dropped, the personal colliding with the political in a gut punch. She slipped away from the D.C. chaos, boarding a midnight train north, her mind racing with plans. Legal appeals, public pressure, anything to stop the machine grinding her brother down. The train rattled through the dark, past towns flickering with protest lights, and she clutched his photo, whispering, "Hold on, Miggy." The movement needed her, but so did he, and the twin burdens threatened to crack her, yet she refused to break. By morning, the world awoke to a fractured reality. Trump's speech had galvanized his base but enraged the rest, sparking fresh protests from Seoul to Sao Paulo. Elena stepped off the train in Chicago, greeted by a crowd at Union Station waving signs, "Free Miguel, free us all." Her eyes welled, not from gas this time, but from the sight of her city rising for her family. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as she addressed them. "Trump closes doors, but we're kicking them down, together." The roar that followed was a promise, a vow that this fight, personal and global, would rage on until the walls fell.